Shri Rajiv Vasudevan. Is the moderator of the session, is the founder CEO of Ayurveda Hospitals, and the former country head of Motorola India PSG, and the former CEO of Technopark and director IT Mission Government of Kerala. Ayurveda Hospital have been named by VC Circle as the most promising healthcare startup of 2013. It's a National Quality Award winner and is the first NABH accredited Ayurveda hospital, pioneering quality systems-driven Ayurveda medical care. Shri Rajiv Vasudevan has an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, and BTech in Mechanical Engineering from Regional Engineering College, Calicut. Over to Shri Rajiv Vasudevan.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. I know that we have really gone past the set time for the schedule for the session, and some of you will be very impatient to hear the excellent speakers we have today. To set the context for the session that is about to happen, if you look at the healthcare sector in India, it is evolving at a pace and in directions which would not have been foreseen some few years back. The very rapid growth of private sector medical service delivery in multiple formats is I think is an eye-opener and could be showcased globally. And I think today we have Indian entrepreneurs in the healthcare service delivery sector who are taking these models and then going into different continents, not just lesser developed countries, but even more developed countries, and to demonstrate the cost-effective skills that Indian healthcare sector brings to the table. If you look at the type of models that have evolved in recent times, we have right from the hospital chains, which are multi-specialty chains, single specialty chains, whether the single specialties could be organ-focused like eyes, kidney, and so on and so forth, very, very specific organs, or it could be a technique-based, whether I take keyhole surgery or a particular, let's say, LASIK surgery, whatever be the technique, that technique being the basis for a replicable, scalable model. Or if you were to take a disease-based specialty approach, which is diabetes, or you take, kidney, or any one psoriasis, certain arthritis, you take these conditions and then go with scalable chains. On the other hand, we have highly concentrated models like the Medanta MedCity or the Narayana Hridayalaya Health City or the Aster MedCity, which is bringing in concentrated investment in all aspects of healthcare into one concentrated geography so that people can come to one destination. So these are all models that are evolving. On the other hand, we have to cater to a highly affluent audience which is developing in most parts of the country, who are willing to spend money for a differentiated quality of service. We have, let's say, birthing centers, which is going from pre-conception to delivery to post-delivery care for mother and child, where maybe a delivery will cost $1.5 lakh because that's that special moment. So where you have certain hospitals at the very low end where a normal delivery is done at 3,000 rupees, you have, let's say, a birthing center which will do it at $1.5 lakh. This is the value spectrum which is being addressed by modern healthcare. On the other hand, we would also see primary healthcare chains which have come into vogue. And they've been funded by the private equity firms because India is such a huge market and there is a dearth of new ideas in healthcare. So anybody in primary healthcare, there are several models in Bombay, in Bangalore, and fast expanding in Chennai, they're opening up. So that is there. We have diagnostic chains, which are the toast of the town. They have grown significantly. In fact, we'd wanted to have a diagnostic chain also represented here today. And that would have completed the spectrum. We are also talking about personalized genomics coming into India in the retail model attached to hospitals. So we're talking about high tech, medium tech, low tech, talking about low cost hospitals. We're talking about the hospitals which go to tier 2 towns and rural areas. All these, India is thriving with healthcare entrepreneurs. On the other hand, we are also looking at beauty and wellness. This discerning consumer is looking at beauty in a different way. He would like to He's willing to spend money on his body, his or her body, and both the transient and the lasting beauty is what people are looking at. And so you have the beauty business, and also things like Kaya skincare, or you're talking about natural salons. The spa business, on the other hand, which is really the chains which have grown. Wellness, we have had the tourism track just which preceded it, this session, and we're talking about wellness going both into the resort, overseas tourist model, as well as the retail model through spas. And to bring up the tail, but a very honorable tail, is Ayurveda, which is sitting and spanning both health, beauty, wellness. And the emergence of a new voice of authentic Ayurveda, whether it be in well-being or whether it be in serious medical care, for chronic disease care, even for, in many cases, for acute management of acute conditions. So, there is a sea change happening in the regulatory environment as vis-a-vis Ayurveda is concerned. We have the IRDA, effective this February of 2013, made a recommendation to insurance companies to include Ayurveda under the scope of insurance, provided they comply with certain minimum quality standards, which is a big opening. Similarly, in August of this year, Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which covers about 110 million people across this country, which is a flagship program of the government of India, which covers the below the poverty line people, which hitherto was off bounds for Ayurveda, has now been opened up for Ayurveda, opening up a market of 100 million plus people to Ayurveda. Of course, in phase one, it is restricted to government hospitals, but definitely, like in the modern medicine sector, Ayurveda, private sector hospitals would also have access to this population. What it does is open up huge markets. And finally, perhaps, so India, therefore, in diversity, we are talking about uniqueness and a unique value for consumers. So today's session, we have, what I have suggested that our fantastic panel of speakers that we have, that we'll be, introducing very briefly shortly. We're talking about a consumer. Who is that consumer that they are targeting? What is the mind of that consumer? Today, this consumer has higher disposable income. However, 80%, 85% of healthcare spending is happening from the pocket. It's not funded by insurance. So that means still people pay from the pocket. And insurance is, of course, growing leaps and bounds. That 15% may become 25% in the coming years. But it's an evolving consumer, as I said earlier. Kerala, in the midst of all this, is a distinct marketplace. And healthcare per se, very health conscious, aware audience with multiplicity of options, right from homeopathy, Ayurveda, modern medicine, all of it. How does, and a very dispersed, accessible public health delivery system of pretty good quality. How does a private sector entrepreneur flourish in that? I think we have very good examples here. The advent of medical tourism at one end, okay? High value added medical tourism. We have centers which are attracting a lot of tourists, whether the Arabs come to Bombay and somebody else goes to, the Nigerians go to Bangalore and or so on and so forth. There are specific places where they go to. What does Kerala offer for health entrepreneurs to attract medical tourists or medical visitation? The story of scaling up. We have great examples here of people who have scaled up substantially in healthcare, beauty, and wellness. So the mindset as doctors, entrepreneurs, as teachers, how did they make this transition to entrepreneurs and how did they scale up? We have one thing which unifies all the four people here, and perhaps me. And that is that we all focus on human well-being. And well-being is beyond a superficial wellness or something like that, but into true body, physical, mental, spiritual balance. Somebody may be taking part of that, but by restoring good health in its totality, we're talking about bringing back that positive health as opposed to removal of a negative alone. And I think everybody, whether it is in wellness or it's in a Medicity or a specialty chain like Sunrise or Dr. Bhashwati, we have a common linkage. One line about Ayurveda, we are a chain of process-driven Ayurveda medical care institutions, completely quality systems driven, metrics driven, trying to position it for the serious healthcare market central government health services approved, medical insurance approved, ensuring that we are able to get into the local corporates and for their employees to partake of Ayurveda medical care. So presenting it in a scalable, replicable model. We have 2 hospitals in Bangalore and 1 in Cochin. And let me conclude my opening remarks by, in one line, introducing each of our speakers. First, we have C. Kumarvel, who I think is the classical entrepreneur story, beginning in his house, between him and his wife, today having 300 points of presence in a business, a fantastic classical entrepreneur story to unfold. In Dr. Hafiz Rahman, a classical doctor, professional turned entrepreneur, and what a scale he has done and shown in scaling up beyond the boundaries of Kerala, globally and nationally. So we'll hear that journey of excellence. And in Dr. Harish Pillai, I think we see what, to my mind, looking at his profile, is a builder. He goes wherever he goes, he builds institutions, organizations in each of them. And I think that journey of building something, what he's tried to come to Kerala and build a center of excellence, will be very interesting to see his vision for what he wants to do for Kerala. And finally, Dr. Bhashwati Bhattacharya, an inspirational international ambassador for Ayurveda and a successful Ayurveda entrepreneur who's been able to, blend the East and the West and really will be a very effective spokesman or spokesperson for
concepts. I don't want to talk about it because there are quite a few other dignitaries who has to speak. Quickly on to the journey of naturals. The beauty is fleeting, but the business of beauty is not. As long as your hair grows, our business grows. It is a 30,000 crore industry growing at 30%. Organized industry is at 10,000 crores, growing faster at 40%. There are around 2 lakh beauty parlors in the country, including barber shops, and there are around 10 lakh people who are directly employed in this industry. These are some of the statistics I know today. Way back in 2000, when me and my wife Veena started this business, I did not know any of the above. Both my kids have started going to the school. There was some time available with Veena, which we want to put into use and make 60,000 rupees a month. That was the idea with which Naturals was started. Veena could have easily stayed at home and glorified herself as a homemaker, or she could have sought a job, but she was very insistent. She said, I want to be self-employed. One of the biggest challenges every entrepreneur faces in the beginning is to identify what to do. Irritation is the biggest source of energy, and if you are irritated about something, look them over very carefully. There lies an opportunity. We were irritated about the absence of a good quality, affordable beauty salon. On one end of the spectrum, there were salons at the 5-star hotel which were intimidating and unaffordable. On the other end of the spectrum, there were barber shops and local salons whose quality standards and hygiene standards and quality of product used is questionable. We couldn't fit into any of the two. So we thought there is a good opportunity to start a good quality, affordable beauty salon. That is the idea we got. The next question is, where do I find the skill? Veena is not a beautician, she is not a hairdresser, she is not a makeup artist. And my knowledge of beauty is even poor. I thought manicure is for feet and pedicure is for hand. We quickly hired a person who was heading the Taj salon, asked her to put the team together and started our first salon in the Kadar Nawaz Khan Road. The third and the most important challenge every first generation entrepreneur faces is, where do I find the money? I favoritely call the 3 Fs, which is the friends, family and fools. I collected the money from these 3 Fs, put them together in 2000 and started the salon with the idea to make 60,000 rupees every month. And the first 3 years are very difficult and the next 3 years are difficult. First year I made a business of 20 lakh and made a loss of 10 lakh. Second year I made a business of 30 lakh and made a loss of 5 lakh. Third year I made a business of 40 lakh and made a loss of 2 lakh. That is the price I have to pay to understand this business. Fourth year I started making the 60,000 rupees. Soon 60 became 1 lakh. I thought we should expand the business. Then we met an auditor and prepared a project report. These days it is called business plan. And went after one bank after another. Banker said the beauty salon means the project cost should be 3 lakhs. We will fund 2 lakhs, you bring in 1 lakh. Anything more means you are taking money from the system. That's what they didn't tell, but that's what they meant. But we continuously kept knocking. After one bank to another, we went to the 10th and the 20th and the 30th and the 40th and the 50th. Finally, the 54th banker said yes to us. And he gave the loan not because of anything else, because we had a property in Anna Nagar. He said, even if these guys don't pay, I can take over the property and ensure my loan is taken care. And he gave us the loan. That helped us to scale up from the 2 salons to the 3 and the 4 and the 5 and the 6. We had 6 salons dotted all over. We were very happy. The 60 became 1 lakh, 1 lakh became 1 lakh 50, 1 lakh became 2 lakh. In India, there is no legal way to spend money more than 2 lakhs if you earn. Otherwise, you have to spend it illegally. So the money lost its charms. Then we thought we should make Naturals as the #1 salon in Chennai. At that point, there is a salon which had 12 branches. We had 6, and we did not have much money to do any comprehensive market research. There was a chain called Food World, the grocery chain. They had 28 stores. And we made a back of the envelope calculation. We said for every 2 Food World, there has to be 1 Naturals. So we identified 14 areas where we can start. We put an advertisement in Hindu and Eenadu, wanted franchises. Because I've been fascinated by the word franchising. My role model is Anita Roddick of Body Shop, the worldwide herbal cosmetics giant. So I've been following her. So I liked her concept. So I thought I should do franchising. So I put a big advertisement in Hindu. There were around 340 inquiries which came in. So I was a little happy. I expected 500. But 340 is not bad. Good. So I thought 340. Then we sent the inquiry forms to the 340 people. The 340 became 33. This is a little shocker for me. Then we started connecting with the people. 33 became 3. And finally, the 3 became 0. In the 2007, nobody wanted to join Naturals because beauty salon is considered a taboo industry. Husband and wife couple is not to be trusted. It is not an MNC. And the business is not a good business. But I quickly went to the table again, worked out another formula, and we said that we will invest 50%, you invest 50%. I spoke to my first set of friends and relatives who by then understood that business is doing well, as making money and as the position is moving up. And they said, okay, if you are investing 50%, then we are willing to play game with you. And slowly they joined us. And soon the 6 became 13, 13 became 27, 27 became 54, 54 became 120, 120 became 220. As I speak to you, we are at 324 salon. And we have the Genelia as our brand ambassador, and she's our road number 3 customers, and we hired her as a brand ambassador, and I put an ad in the Famina, and the decision maker of the Bharati Walmart retail chains wife saw this ad, and they were scouting for a salon partner, and they called our office and checked whether it is a downloaded image or an original image of Genelia. We said it's an original image. The next question is, how can a salon afford Genelia? We said we are 124 salon at that point of time. They said, we have not heard of you. The shortlisted brands were Lakme, VLCC, Enrich, Javed Habibs, and one more, Lux. These were the 5 salons because the decision maker is sitting in Delhi and we were in South. So we said, this is what we are doing. They called us to Delhi. We went there and made a presentation. And they liked us, and they gave us the mandate to open 250 stores across all their Easy Days stores. That is one of the important landmark in the journey called Naturals so far. But what gives me immense satisfaction is not the money what we make, it is not the #1 status, it is not the awards what we have received, it is not even the tie-up with the world #1 retailer. I have a dream. My dream is to erase the word called housewife from the Indian dictionary. I have a goal. My goal is to create 1,000 women entrepreneurs, 3,000 salon, and 50,000 jobs by 31st December 2017. But if I have to make this dream come true, I realize that I require a lot of money. I am a guy who is brought up from a middle-class family from a small town called Kadalur near Pondicherry. And I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters, large family, a lot of friends, relatives, and we used to grow together. My mom used to head the family. And today we live in a society, if husband and wife live together, it is called joint family. I am not talking about that. I am talking about something which is more important, which is about the view about money in the Indian middle class. The middle class of India, there is an unsaid word which says, rich are greedy, rich are arrogant, rich are bad, rich will exploit the poor. I experientially realized that if you don't have money, you can't do much. Every good human being has the moral responsibility to be rich. If good people do not desire to become rich, money will go in the hands of bad people, and bad people will use that and destroy the society. It is not the action of the bad people which destroys the society, it is the inaction of the good people which does. Money is beautiful, money gives you choice of what dress to wear, what car to drive, where you can put your children to school, where you can go to, which hospital you can go when you are sick. Money is beautiful. But money is not everything. Money is like a fuel to your car. It is neither the journey nor the destination. It is just a part of the transportation system. Do not chase money, make money chase you. Money is a byproduct. Money is not a main product by itself, excepting for Reserve Bank of India. Love money, use people, you got it wrong. Love people, use money, you got it right. The glory of the book is not in the number of pages you have read. It is in the number of pages you are going to read. The glory of the life is not in the number of days you have lived. It is in the number of days you are going to live from now on. Glory of naturals is not in the 330 salon we have opened so far. It is in the 2,670 salon we are going to open from now on. Together, let us build a beautiful India. Be rich, be happy. Thank you so much.
Again, this is just one story, and I have only one story to tell you. 20 years back when I came to Cochin, after my studies, I was a gynecologist. I was just thinking of how to start my practice and build up things. I never thought that I will be a laparoscopic surgeon, and that's a big story, which I'm not planning to tell you now. But over the years, I became a laparoscopic surgeon, even though I didn't think that I can reach these heights. And today we have done the largest number of laparoscopic surgeries in the world. Over 20 years, that is more than 70,000 surgeries. I operated in 5 different countries and 450 hospitals and trained 2,500 doctors and learned a lot about medicine. And finally, after 13 years of my practice, I wanted to start a hospital of my own. And from that time, I found that I was in a big problem. And this was 7 years back when we started Sunrise Hospital in Kakinad, Cochin. And that time, my biggest problem is the money or the capital which I had didn't suit with the heights I have achieved. I was known to be a big doctor and I could not work in a smaller setup, but I didn't have that much money with me to start a very big setup. So we were just thinking what exactly to do. The only thing which I had was around 80 lakh rupees, and our dreams were quite big as any other entrepreneur. And apart from 80 lakhs rupees, I had one of my biggest support. My wife, as all of you know, behind any successful man, there is one woman. And of course, behind an unsuccessful person, there are two. We were actually that time scared of losses because I didn't know that time much to calculate about money and all those things. I was just purely a professional operating day in and out, seeing patients, looking after patients. And our other biggest worry my wife had is my key man dependence, because this entire hospital is going to depend on one doctor. What happens if something happens to you? You build all these things and something happens to you, what will I do? So that was my biggest worry, and lack of capital, and of course some fears to take loans. I'm not coming from a very business family. My father was an employee in fertilizers and chemicals of Travancore. So we were actually worried about taking loans, and of course lack of large backups. So what we did is, we wanted a hype, because to my stature I could not practice in a small hospital. I could not just make a clinic or a daycare center and practice there, because I was known even that time to be one of the best surgeons in the world, where even the Europeans and Americans used to recognize. And I could not just set up and tell my colleagues that I've set up a small clinic and things. So I built up and we never wanted to compromise on quality, because that is the last thing which I would do, to compromise, and quality is always expensive. and we never wanted to compromise on patient care. That is again one of the last thing, because I knew that compromising on these two things would be the last nail to my coffin. What we did was, healthcare was definitely a passion. It was not really a business proposal, but I knew that I am doing some business and I should be financially viable. So I created a very top class small hospital inside a very, very large building. Actually, if you see that building, in the beginning, it was just the outer shell which was there, and we just had 4 or 5 rooms inside and a fantastic operation theater. I invested mainly on the operation theater, which I used to spend time, because I can buy a Mercedes for myself, where I used to spend time maximum in my life. And I still remember the first day when one patient was admitted, the patient called me in the night, "Doctor, this hospital, there is nobody. I'm so scared. It's such a huge building and you had admitted me here." So I went to the hospital and slept in the hospital itself so that she's comfortable. We started there, and what we did actually is we got the best of the doctors who were available, because many of the doctors, the best in the country, were ready to work with me because I had that name and fame. So they were all ready to work with me. We never compromised on the equipments. We got the best of the equipments and created that hype of being a very class hospital. We knew actually where to compromise and create a large feeling, even though we actually were not that time a very big hospital. So ultimately, what happened is we understood the pulse of the common man. We understood where to catch the common people, and we understood where it will work well, and we knew how to deliver quality to them. Because that is always the key to success. And at the same time, we know that we need to think big, and a grandeur feeling should be created among ourselves so that we achieve our dreams. It's not about being big in the field, but basically it's knowing how big you are, which is much more important rather than just being big. Because what I found is, just by being a good doctor, you cannot progress in life just by doing a fantastic surgery or doing good work. You will keep on doing good work, but you will find that you're not really progressing in life. You have to know that how good you are. We were successful financially from day one, basically because of the key man, basically because our enterprise was smaller in a big shell, and we never saw losses in the first project. It was not so in the other project. That's why I'm specifically telling first project. At least one trump card should be there for every business. Basically, what I used to feel is we should do business, or we should be entrepreneurs of the fields in which we actually know, where we are actually professionals. And it should be something different than others, and you should have a real focus on exactly what we are planning to do and we are going to do. Our biggest marketing was our patients, basically a mouth-to-mouth publicity, because we had something different to offer them what the others could not, and that was basically the sunrise. We used to call it as the sunrise experience. We actually had big plans and big dreams. You know, the best way to make God laugh is to tell him about your plans. Even though you can dream, we never had any idea of how to achieve our dreams, but nothing prevented us from dreaming very, very big. Never be a miser in your dreams. You dream maximum. Nothing prevents you from that. And you will see that one thing which is very sure is that only if you are a good dreamer, only if you can dream to that height, you will find that slowly you are achieving to that heights. Starting the hospital, it was easy to start initially when it was small, but over a period of time, we saw that we are growing. More doctors are coming in, more patients coming in. The structure, which was only a shell, became a full-fledged hospital with all specialities. We started getting administrative flaws, and we found that, doctors think that they can manage hospitals. But that was an absolutely wrong idea. Doctors know to treat patients only. They are not hospital administrators or hospital managers. They are not entrepreneurs. I'd spent all my life in operation theaters, and suddenly I found that I'm not a good manager. I'm not a good entrepreneur. And that is a time, and it's a long time gone, and we learned it in a very hard way. And hospital management is a big jungle. Hospital management has everything. It has hospitality, it has medical treatment in it, financial problems, it's trading. You have a pharmacy where you buy and sell things. You have so many trading agencies inside. You have research which is going on. You have food to handle. You have engineering, because hospital building as such is a machinery. It's not just a building, it's a machinery by itself. And you have the information technology, which is rising very high in hospital industry. So we found that the best thing for an investor is to understand that there are always much better and intelligent people than you. The success actually didn't depend on investing on more intelligent people than what you are, but also on listening to them. Listen to them carefully. Understand that there are so many things in this world which you are not knowing, and there are so many people who knew this method of managing hospitals or being entrepreneurs or managing things, not just buying them, but listening to them, which is much more important. Should we market healthcare as such was our question which arose next. And we had all, how doctors are, they are very finicky in certain things. We thought, how can I market myself? How can a doctor market? I was in the board of Medical Council of India, and there were MCA regulations for marketing. And we understood that only we can tell about ourselves. Nobody else is going to tell about ourselves. So we had a different way of marketing rather than giving large advertisements and all. We invested in corporate social responsibilities. We went into the crowd. We helped a lot of patients, and that was one of our biggest marketing. Even today, our institutions are doing 100 surgeries in different parts of the world free of cost. And this is being supported by a lot of eminent people. We have an organization which is patroned by Ghulam Nabi and Sushil Kumar Shinde, which is doing all these programs on the banner of Sunrise Hospital. A professional marketing was done, and of course, we were very sure that it has to be an ethical marketing. We never told anything which we didn't achieve at all. And we invested in creating medical awareness among the patients and among the public. We told about new surgeries to them. We told them about new technologies. We never told them about coming to hospitals. We invested in health awareness, creating health awareness. We invested in corporate social responsibilities. We were the best in infrastructure and IT technology, and we did a lot of rare procedures. So many rare procedures were done in our hospitals because, as I told you, we had the best in the field, and we had a key word which is called minimally invasive surgery. World over, minimally invasive surgery is known to be restricted in smaller hospitals. But we saw that minimally invasive surgery is just another word for surgery. It should not be restricted in smaller hospital because this is infiltrating into every field of medicine. Nobody wants to cut open the body, and today we have the largest group of minimally invasive surgeons in the world and the largest number of minimally invasive surgeries. Quality remains the key. You can offer a lesser quality at a lesser price, but believe me, you will not succeed just because of the prices. You can offer a high quality at a higher price also. Still, you may not succeed. The success comes a workforce of more than 800 staff, because large workforce and the higher pays which we give in Kerala and the lower cost of healthcare in Kerala for an entrepreneur is not a good destination. So You will not go to Somalia just because the cost is very low and get a surgery done. Will you go to Somalia? You will not. Don't ever believe that the tourists from outside are coming to India or coming to Kerala just because Kerala is beautiful, Kerala is a good tourist destination, Kerala the costs are less. No. You need to win the confidence of these people, because I have been operating in different places like Africa, Gulf and lot of other places. It's important to understand them and understand the confidence. One of the biggest problem, they don't come for a small surgery, they do come for a major procedures, traveling all the way here, and they do come to larger infrastructure and largest places, not to very smaller places. But understand, when they land in the Indian airports and come into our roads, see, they cannot come inside the operation theater and see how many equipments you have and decide on how good we are. They look at the overall picture. They see our roads, they see the infrastructure, they see the buildings, they have a different picture altogether. And when they come into the hospital, especially the European patients or the Caucasians, there is a huge cultural difference which they are going to face when they come into our Indian hospitals. Whatever said and done, our culture is totally different.
Dr. Rahman, 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. So we need to adjust to their culture, we need to get into their culture to understand them, and then exactly how to cater to them. Because anybody who comes across, we may not, our super may not say good morning or how are you and all those things. They are not used to hearing such, they are not used to not hearing such words. They get very irritated, or even a doctor who comes doesn't introduce himself in our culture that I am so and so, can I examine? Whether I'll ask the patient whether I can examine. They are used to such culture, and our doctors are mostly not used to such culture. So that is one big challenge we faced in medical tourism. And if you understand this cultural difference, we can actually win a lot in medical tourism. Sunrise and Ortus. Ortus is the global image of sunrise. It's the Latin word for sunrise. Today we have around 17 centers, not 17, actually 20 centers, 250 doctors, 3,000 beds, and today we have grown as the fastest growing, one of the fastest growing healthcare sectors in Africa, Gulf, and we are starting into East Europe in countries also. The question is, do we start hospitals like what we started before? Because we started before as a small nutshell and then we grew slowly. Actually, the answer is we do not start it like that now. Of course, today we believe in a Big Bang theory. We need to start afresh and we need to create that big hospitals. And the Bombay project, which we are starting and opening in February, it's a 300 crore project. We have 50 crores of around 50 crores of bank loans, and 6% is our borrowing. And we have a better negotiating capacity on equipments than what we had initially when we started, managed by the best in the industry. But of course, we will make losses. We know that it's not like the first project where we were successful from day one. Here we are going to make losses, but we can sustain those losses, and we know that if you start like this, we will grow much faster. And this is our LAP project also. And this is the LAP project, and this is just one more minute, I'll be finishing. This is the Bombay project which is coming up. Because the kind of infrastructure we can do in those places is totally different actually from what we can do in Kerala, mainly because of the affordability. We're not sure if we spend so much in Kerala, whether it will be worth because of the total difference in the cost. So basically what I have to tell you is, it's not just about doing things, it's just about how we have to do things. And just see this video. This is two Arab women having noodles in an Italian restaurant. Spaghetti, yeah. It's not about the question of the spaghetti, or it's not about the question of the abaya or parda, but it's the question of how you do it, which is how you take it, which is much more important. and to be successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. Harish Pillai, is the Chief Executive Officer of Aster MedCity, an iconic homegrown integrated medical city of international standards coming up in Kochi, Kerala. Dr. Pillai has wide experience in hospital administration and has led several healthcare firms in India, UAE and Egypt. Dr. Pillai's core expertise lies in commissioning both greenfield hospitals as well as in leading strategic restructuring of sick projects. He has always been in leadership roles throughout his academic and professional career. Dr. Pillai holds 2 master degrees, Masters in Hospital Administration from Apollo Institute of Hospital Administration, Hyderabad, India, and an MBA in International Healthcare and Hospital Management from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, Germany. Over to Dr. Pillai.
Thanks everyone. Special thanks to Jose and Tai for having me here. What I'm going to say is exactly opposite of what my eminent colleague Dr. Rahman said. I'm going to just give you a totally different perspective about why I think and my group thinks that Kerala is such a wonderful destination for healthcare and why we ought to invest more. So it's a counterpoint. The quantum of investment, what my company is going to do specifically in Kochi is about $300 million US. And when in a very simple term, we are talking about a Tier 1 investment in a Tier 2 city, if we describe Kochi as a Tier 2 city. So I just want to give you a glimpse of what are we thinking about when we look at Kerala. Why do we think that Kerala is a very interesting health story from a investor's perspective and perhaps triggers of some ideas among some of you. So quickly we'll talk about the macro picture, which I think all of us need to understand that when we talk about investments, obviously a market ought to be there. So I will give you a view of the market. Definitely we have challenges, and then the story about why is Kerala such an interesting place. So the big picture is that, most of us ought to know that all the Malayali men and the Malayali women have the longest lifespans in India. It's something you need to be proud of. You're way up there at a mean expectancy at birth of 76.8 years. So most of the Malayalis in Kerala have the longest lifespans across the country. On the right side, you have, of course, our Bimaru states, and we sincerely hope that folks such as Nitish Kumar can do wonders for places such as Bihar. Again, when we talk about infant mortality rates, these are important for us to know because that's where the world perceives when we look at healthcare. These are important indicators. So Kerala has really done well. Hats off to society and to the government. But I believe that the fact of the matter is that because of a sex ratio, that we have more women than men, and because of our unique social heritage, that's one of the reasons why health indicators are so good and sustainable in Kerala. When we look at Kerala versus the rest of the world, it's quite remarkable because the world looks at classical division socioeconomically as low income or low middle income economies, the upper middle income economies and the high income economies. Now Kerala is at a very interesting location where when we talk about maternal mortality rate is 81, it's still high compared to the middle income and the high income economies. But the birth rate, it's remarkably, it's really up there in the world. But that poses a different set of challenges, which I'll touch in a few minutes. We have a great transition. This is a reflection of the maturity of our society. We have moved away from communicable diseases to nutritional and perinatal diseases to non-communicable and degenerative diseases. The press has been talking about in the past 5 years the re-emergence of communicable diseases because of our urban challenges, primarily waste management, whether it's chikungunya, dengue. Now these are all new communicable diseases which we are faced with. But one formula which I would like to, for you to understand is the concept of DALI. DALI is, in very simple terms, the economic loss to a society of a productive workforce, either because you're sick, you can't go to your job, or you have significant health issues which cut short your life. So you are a real loss to society. So when we talk about that kind of a burden for Kerala, we have, unfortunately, we are almost everywhere on the map, whether it's cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, diabetes, All these aspects, we have a huge burden. The big picture is that India, our country, has unfortunately become the diabetic capital of the world, and our state, my friends, Kerala, is truly the diabetic capital of India. So that's a huge hotspot where we are concerned. The other big picture which we all need to be really worried about is we are actually facing a tsunami of cardiovascular diseases. And you can look at the numbers. If you look at 8 standardized coronary artery disease in Kerala, it's really shocking. When you compare with rural Kerala, with rural China, or to Japan, or to the US, we are actually confronting the tsunami of disease. And it goes back to, you can talk about genetics, but in my book, it's all to do with your metabolic syndrome, to do with diabetes. The other big challenge which we face is that we are rapidly aging. I already shared with you before about how we are with the rest of the world, but we are a rapidly aging society. As of, I would say, this year, we would be almost touching about 5 million geriatrics. You know, the definition of geriatrics in India is people above 60 years. And when you talk about our country, that's going to be a huge burden. By 2021, we're talking about 140 million geriatrics in the country, of which the biggest chunk would be from our state. So this is something which we need to talk about. And typically, you talk to anyone in healthcare, as you get older, you have to visit the doctors more often, probably access healthcare more often. So all these aspects, whether your average rate of using diagnostics, your replacement surgeries, all these things are rapidly increasing because there's a huge demand, and supply has not, unfortunately, kept pace with demand in society. One more bombshell which I would like to present to all of you is obesity. Thankfully, we are not the number one state in the country for obesity, but we have the dubious distinction of being number 2 after Punjab. We are an obese society. That also contributes to our disease burden. Now, the previous speakers did talk about, our moderator did talk about out-of-pocket expenditure, and he has been spot on. It's about 86% is out-of-pocket expenses. The same thing, but we do know from stats that more people are getting conscious about the real criticality of having an insurance cover, at least for your families. If your employers do not provide insurance, that kind of a safety net is increasing, and we find that out-of-pocket expenses hopefully will decrease year on year. The big challenges is, of course, on the supply side, we have resource issues. The circles talk about what the WHO mandates per 10,000 population, and where are we in our country? We don't have enough doctors or nurses, so that, I suppose, is a big challenge. If you look at Kerala, our hospital beds per 10,000 population is almost on par, if not better than the WHO recommendations. But on the human resources side, we have a long way to go, whether it's nurses or doctors. This would be a big challenge in setting up facilities. The shortages in manpower, some folks in the Medical Council of India need to wake up the way they have structured medical education. You know, it's a classical pyramid structure. You have so many graduate doctors, but you know, where do they go for postgraduate studies? We don't have enough institutions in our country to train a large number of doctors. Cumulatively, we have a deficit of 12 lakh doctors in our country. We're talking about 36 lakh nurses. That's huge numbers. So the medical education, the regulators responsible for medical education need to really brainstorm and come out of the box ideas. So these are those challenges which we talked about. Quickly, what could be the policy goals where Kerala specific is concerned? We need to have incentives. You know, this whole debate between public and private, we have to demolish that and look at public and private hand in hand as a glove together. I have a dream that in the next 5 years' time, Kerala can compete effectively with Singapore. Now, if you want, I will explain the reason why I benchmark Singapore with Kerala, primarily because I feel that the new wave of jobs and contribution to GDP would come from modern medicine or from healthcare. So there are a set of policy goals and pathways which we need to go. Perhaps incentives to put up more infrastructure in the state. We need to increase the supply of manpower. Talk about new private-public partnership models, third-party quality validation, not someone telling that, you know, we have an accreditation, perhaps we are doing something good. A third-party independent accreditator, increase the health insurance penetration, and position our state as a medical value travel hub. Why again Kerala? I mean, I talked about there's a genuine need in the market. There is a demand-supply gap. because of NCDs, because of a rapidly aging population. So that gap is going to rapidly increase. Somebody will have to bring in, either public sector or private sector would have to bring in the money. Our median age group is already 31. If you look at urbanization, there is a trend worldwide that the more urban you are as a demographic society, you will access healthcare much more. Ernakulam, the district where we are located right now, has got a 68% urban population, whereas the state is almost 50-50, urban-rural divide. Nationally, when you look at the demographic, the classical demographic charts, look at where Bihar is. Most of our workers today in Kerala in construction projects come from either Bihar or Bengal because they have surplus manpower. They're a young population. Whereas in Kerala, look at our state. I mean, our state has got a very different kind of a demographic picture. I worry that in the next 5 years' time, if Nitish Kumar and all the North Indian states really do well economically, we will not have manpower. We may have to think out of the box ideas of importing manpower from neighboring countries. And even on the pan-India map, that's 31, we have the highest median age group within India, followed by Goa. The state of Goa is 30 behind us. So these are something which policymakers need to look at. Now, as drivers for healthcare, I talked about the rapidly aging population. We have rising income levels, growing urbanization, increased burden of chronic diseases, increased accessibility of health insurance and medical value travel. So these are the right formulas why we feel that there will be more and more demand for good quality healthcare. The opportunities from an investor's perspective, obviously you have on the delivery side and also on the enabler side. It is not just one hospital sitting in isolation, but you have the whole ecosystem. You could have a huge collateral positive impact on IT, healthcare IT, the medical equipment suppliers, the guys who are into the business of consumables. We have training and education opportunities, medical waste management opportunities, facility management, food and beverages. So there is so much of opportunities which generate extra revenue across society. So there's a spillover impact of putting up a small hospital in any part of the state. The stats show that in terms of the facility support for a hospital, it's a $1 billion and counting. So there's a growth of 20% compound annual growth rate of this sector.
3 minutes, please.
Yeah, we are just winding up. So there are also issues for investment in healthcare, like rightly pointed out, land is a premium issue where Kerala is concerned. So we'll have to look at out-of-the-box challenges of how do we put up a hospital. Now, classically, at the lower end, in terms of US dollars per bed is about 50 to 60,000 US dollars per bed for secondary hospital and multiples thereafter. But you could always go for asset-light model. You don't need to own the building per se or go into the tough part of constructing a building. You can be the operator. You can lease out the facility for a long term. That's one model you can look at. And so it's again based on which sector you want to go in. Daycare is becoming quite popular. It's pretty simple. You could have put in 2 theaters, maybe 10 to 12 outpatient clinics, a few diagnostics, and get your system run. But overall, countries in Southeast Asia which have invested heavily in tourism, general tourism, I'm not talking about medical value travel, all our neighboring countries, whether it's Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, on the west side, Jordan, those countries who have put up infrastructure for general tourism strangely have benefited also from medical value travel. So that's a lesson which Kerala needs to recognize. It's a huge contributor towards GDP. The big picture for all of us is that a 12 lakh investment for tourism generates 89 jobs compared to the similar investments in agriculture, manufacturing or other service sector. That's the upswing which we need to know about talking about modern medicine. So what can we do in Kerala? God's own country, this is a terrific brand recall. We have a good story to talk to the global audience. Connectivity is fantastic. We have internationally trained and experienced medical staff like our colleague Dr. Rahman. All these things I think are extremely positive to make Kerala as a viable modern healthcare destination. We also have strong governmental support. There is a recognition from government that perhaps modern medicine can generate the extra jobs. These are the various aspects where medical value travels could come in, right from cosmetic to high-end work. That's classical example of our project. We are investing $300 million not just for a hospital. We are creating an entire township where hopefully in 5 years' time we would have a resident population of 10,000 living on campus. So that's, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
I wanted to help the poor. So in specializing with patients, I realized that things that can come easy for patients rather than easy for the rich was what I wanted to look at. Around that time, I made a documentary film. I was asked to get involved simply because I'm a doctor and I'm Indian. They thought I knew what Ayurveda was. And because I really wanted to come to Kerala, I said, yeah, I know what Ayurveda is, even though I didn't. And so I quickly read a book and I came to Kerala. I made a documentary that's on Discovery Channel, learned about Ayurveda, and saw things, frankly, that I had not known was possible, and that was the beginning of my journey. What I saw was that I had learned in, so I have degrees in neuroscience and pharmacology and allopathic medicine and nutrition and all, and I had learned that once a person had a stroke, it was permanent, and all we could do is give them some rehabilitation and end-of-life care. Was stroke patients that I had thought was impossible to work with. I was just saying that all we learned in allopathic medicine is rehab. And I saw people getting better. And I asked, what is this? And they said, oh, this is a process called panchakarma. I didn't know what panchakarma was. I started looking into this. I saw a child with cerebral palsy who should have stayed in her palsy state. And I watched her in 6 weeks starting to actually put strength in her legs and open up her arms. I saw a diabetic patient who should have stayed diabetic for the rest of his life because we've learned that diabetes is permanent. And I saw that actually, it's okay, I got it. I saw that actually this person became undiabetic. And it showed me that there are things that are possible that I didn't know was possible. And I think this is the journey that I keep in my heart, because the idea of being an explorer, the idea of being someone that has an empty mind, beginner's mind, that thinks that things are possible even when everyone tells you they're not. There were people at Harvard and Columbia and Penn that had told me this was impossible. And I saw with my own eyes what was in Kerala. And I started looking into this, and I started asking those questions as a scientist. If this is possible, why is it that modern medicine doesn't know about this? Why is it that Ayurvedic people are doing this, and modern medicine doesn't know about it? So of course, what ended up happening is that over the next few years, I started looking into how can I learn more about Ayurveda while continuing my job as an allopathic doctor. Eventually, I made my way up in the allopathic world. As a director, and you're supposed to become a director and then a chairman, and then eventually you work your way up and you become chairman of the board and all. And what they started doing is they would pay me more money. So I had my Mercedes outside. I had all the if status is important to you and you have your checklist to prove to everyone else how good you are, I had all those. And I started checking off the list, and I realized that what they were doing is trapping me into a system where I would need those things for my self-esteem, and I would stop taking care of patients. I would stop being able to be a good doctor that just specializes in patients, and I would become part of that system. So I took a step back, and I decided I wanted to start a holistic health program in the hospital, and did that and made it part of my contract that I could spend 2 to 3 months a year, which is a long time for US people to get vacation, to spend 2 to 3 months a year learning Ayurveda in India while keeping my position in the USA. And as I did that and started learning more Ayurveda, I started incorporating Ayurveda into my practice. And with all the different trainings that I have, I just started it as a little cottage industry, my own little clinic. And doctors told me, you'll never make it. You're in Manhattan. You are a woman. You're young. I also trained pretty late in my career. I was in my 30s when I was in medical school. You'll never make it. And I just started. I took mentors, and I started seeing patients to see if I could do it, just to see if I could start working with patients. And what I found is that working with both very wealthy celebrities and heads of state and people that would come to me saying, can you do something? You're a doctor and you're also learning Ayurveda. I started getting very good patient results. And then the question came, do I want to scale this up? And I decided that I don't want to scale it up, but what I want to do is look at what lessons that I've learned in my journey so far and send that out to other people. So rather than me making the profit, how do I teach other people to build such things? So I want to share some of that with you. One is the lesson of authenticity. So I start, of course, with pranams to my teachers. One is Dhanvantari on the left, the god of healing, and one is the man who captured me and made me his student. And this slide I was going to show you earlier, and this is Why Not Ayurveda. This is the Macaulay Reform Act, which the British put together, that said that, oh, there's nothing. Why do you have a picture of me up there? Terrible. This didn't go on? This didn't connect? Okay. Okay. Okay, so you can just look at that picture then. All right, so I'll have to speak this. I thought, yeah, you're giving me a big challenge. It's good. So my lessons are, first of all, questions for you. First of all, how do I stay authentic in Ayurveda and be innovative? So my first question to you all is, how many of you are actually involved with Ayurveda here in this group? There's a few of you. And how many of you have never heard of Ayurveda as, is there anyone? Okay, I think you're in Kerala, so you should have heard of Ayurveda. So I looked at how do you stay authentic. There are plenty of people in Kerala, throughout India, and in the USA and Europe who are not doing authentic Ayurveda. What they're doing is spa, beauty. I learned today about ABS, which is Ayurveda Beauty and Slimming. All of this is good in terms of just being a quick and dirty, what can I sell? Okay, if I can sell a can of Pepsi Cola and I don't want to sell that anymore, let me sell Ayurveda. Why? Because one of my relatives was Ashtavaidya, or I know someone who knows some Ayurveda. Let me just do that. That is there. I'm aware that that is there, but that's not what I decided I want to work with. And the reason is this. When I look at my patients are the core. They are the source of my centeredness, and they are the source of what I consider real inner power. Helping people and making real authentic Ayurveda to grow is really where I think there's a huge potential for entrepreneurship. Why is that? Because when you get sick, do you really want someone giving you a 60-70% effort? Do you really want someone to give you something that gives them a really big profit margin, which is the way you're going to be running your businesses, which is the way most people run their businesses? Let me see how much profit I can pull out of that. Or would you rather have a doctor that gives you 100% and gives you full quality? What I do is I teach my students, who are all health professionals, how to give pure quality to their patients, how to be organized, how to be meticulous, how to make sure that the emergency rooms or the operating rooms that they run have everything in place and is done, you know, that adage, cleanliness is next to godliness, how to do it really well. The problem with Ayurveda in this country right now is that people are not organized. The people that learn Ayurveda, the Ayurvedic physicians, do not have a medical education system that actually trains them how to take that theory and put it into practice in a meticulous way. They don't have regulators who actually even understand what Ayurveda is. The people that are entrepreneurs don't really understand what Ayurveda is. And so what I try to do is teach that quality. I know there's people getting up and leaving because they don't want quality. How do I find true domain experts? That's another thing that I ask entrepreneurs to look at. So my second point was, if you really want to do a business in Ayurveda, I suggest that you put together a council of elders who are really good at real Ayurveda and take their advice. There are so many elders who are going to be no more in about 20 years who really know Ayurveda, and they have no one that wants to learn it from them. And they come to me and they say, Bhashwati, please come and spend 2 weeks with me. My son one has become an engineer, one has become an IT professional, one has become an MBA. Nobody wants to do Ayurveda. Please come and just learn these things that I know how to make. They are not scalable. I don't want to sell them to Dabur so that they can become, you know, the next fad remedy. I want you to learn how to make these remedies and keep this knowledge alive. And that is why I took the Fulbright Scholarship to be here in this country for this year and learn what those remedies are so that we can figure out how to preserve that knowledge. There's a real place for entrepreneurship if you look in the IEC space, which is Information, Education, Communication, which is an acronym that most of you know from World Bank. If you look at information, there's a place to take authentic Ayurveda knowledge, which is there, and there are people that know it, and to bring it into the IT world, to bring it into the digital space, to translate it to the foreigners who want to come and learn real Ayurveda. And if you're in the tourist space, medical tourism, or you have a spa and you just incorporate some education there, there are many, many people who would love to have that education they're willing to pay. So I bring 15 people every year they pay the place that they're staying. In addition, they pay a really hefty amount. They'll pay $200 per week per person. So if it's a class of 10, that Vaidya gets, you know, a good chunk of money, $2,000 in a week, for teaching 10 people about authentic Ayurveda. It's a really good opportunity if you know how to get those actual domain experts, teach them how to communicate it. So then the C is communication. Communication means doing things in the digital space. It means creating products that have labels that give communication to patients in a usable way. So I'll give you an example. Most people I know have gastrointestinal disorders, either pretty chronically or acutely. Why acutely? Because in this room, I can just guess a third of you have irritable bowel syndrome from statistics. But because you're flying around, because you don't have regular hours, because many of you are on your Blackberries late at night, you get up early in the morning, you have way too much to do, you have demands of time and money and people over you constantly pushing you, your gut is the last thing you take priority over. If I could educate you how to bring your gut back into order, I'm sure many of you would not only make more money and do well, but you would be much happier people. So how do I communicate that to you? Ginger, adrak, or ada, whatever your language calls it, ginger, raw ginger. If you take that and you carry that around with you and you put some black salt on it and some lemon juice on it, and you marinate it for 5 minutes and you eat that, and that increases your gastric fire, it'll help you to digest your food. And if you do that before lunch, 10 minutes before lunch and 10 minutes before dinner, it will help your system to become full of fire as you eat your food, and then it will die down as your food absorbs that fire. I give this simple remedy to people. I used to tell them orally, and some of them would do it. I started writing it on nice little pieces of paper and making little communication cards for them. I give it to the patient. They come back a week later. They're off their Zantac, they're off their omeprazole, they're off their various drugs that they've been taking for acid reflux or hyperacidity. And these kind of small remedies that are known to most Ayurvedic doctors are very usable. And there's a real space for creating this kind of knowledge, which I just conveyed to you in about 45 seconds, and making it into a business opportunity. The next slide was going to show you different modalities of Ayurveda, which include things that you already know, like herbs and the herb space. But it also includes things like understanding what the Shastras, the Ayurvedic texts, talk about as about 15 different modalities, and there's opportunities for entrepreneurship in each of these modalities. They include things like nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, upavasa, which is the art of fasting. It's also called langana, or making your body lighter. Abhyanga, which is massage. Raga chikitsa, it's the use of music and classical Indian music for healing. So for example, if people are mourning, I'll have them go to YouTube and use Raga Marwa and listen to that as an instrumental. And many, many of my patients will say, wow, that was amazing. I don't feel that sense of grief that I did before. So I show people how to take this knowledge and use it in their own lives. And then I have things that most of you know: meditation, yoga, pranayam, rasayana, and panchakarma, which you've heard of. And I was going to show you that slide because any of you who are thinking of being in the Ayurveda space should not only be thinking of herbs. You should be thinking of other things that you can do, and actually using parallels from the examples that were given by the other doctors here, and adopting new ideas or creating things that you see are missing in your particular locale. So how will you do that? So I already talked about finding domain expertise through a council of people, and I already talked about being authentic and not trying to just hybridize something, but really going to what's authentic Ayurveda. But the other thing is that if you look at people's values, people are really interested in you caring for them and coaching them. And one of the biggest things that we know is needed in the US, it's actually come up as a term called holistic health coaching. There's the doctor, there's the nurse, there's the insurance regulator, there's the various people in the healthcare system. But one thing that they've noticed is missing is the coach. And that's the person that's like your mom that tells you to take the medicine when you should take it, right? Remember when you were little and someone told you. So this is the coach that will navigate through the healthcare system and help you to make the choices that are right for you as an individual, based on your priorities, your lifestyle, your economic status, where you live, and what you specifically want to focus on. If you have 5 problems, one may be most important to you. Those health coaches, there are courses now coming up for them. It's a huge business, and it's making lots of money in the US. Yes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. Okay, so if you could start a business of health coaching, that was one idea. I'm just going to run through 5 or 6 ideas that are here. Literature research services on Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not organized the way it should be, possibly because the government has people that don't know how to organize. But having a business idea that's internet-based, very easy. There are a lot of people that could help you with that. Ayurvedic emergency medicine. I actually use Ayurveda for emergency medicine. I think it's faster than many things in allopathy in many cases. And I have a kit that I use in the ER where I have turmeric, I have neem. Neem is great for acute gastroenteritis. Turmeric is the best hemostatic I've found, especially for cuts around the face or deep cuts. And I put together a kit like that. And if you could market something like that, it would be amazing. Something I haven't talked about is the methodology of clinical research in Ayurveda. So they are called ACROs, Ayurvedic Clinical Research Organizations. There are ideas that we've come up with for Ayurvedic nutrition and epigenomics, which Ayurveda specializes in epigenomics, so to translate that through. And looking at metals and minerals. Now, most of you know that heavy metals are now banned, but if you know the field of Rasa Shastra, the reason that metals are so toxic is that they kill cells. So if it happens to be a cancer cell or it happens to be a tumor cell, metals are used in modern medicine, they're used in Rasa Shastra, and that field is going to be coming up because the WHO says that antibiotics are very quickly going out of use with multiple drug resistance and the antibiotic resistance. So people are starting once again to learn how to use metals, and there's a huge, huge potential for that in our entrepreneurial world. There are also biotechnology tools that would integrate modern medicine with Ayurvedic science. So how do you do this? First is to decide whether or not you want to do a service, a product, or a public awareness education type of thing. And then for yourself, I just came up with 3 last points for you to start as an entrepreneur in Ayurveda. One is do your homework, of course, and a SWOT analysis of the market that you're trying to get into. Second is spend at least 10 hours to learn the basic concepts of Ayurveda. I am appalled at how many people are in Ayurveda for years and have not sat down. It takes 10 hours to sit with someone and learn Vata, Pitta, Kapha, Am, Agni, Dhatu. These are the basic concepts. I can sit down with people and explain it. And if you really understand the concepts of what Ayurveda is, you won't be just saying, oh yeah, Ayurvedic herbs and tossing around terms as a non-domain expert. You'll at least have an idea. And then the last is to do self-care. Walk the talk, learn what is called
Hospital ensures evidence-based care. So it's an algorithm-driven model, and it's now being scaled up across West Bengal and hopefully to other states of India. So that model is already there. The comment about manpower, yes, it's quite true that if we make more investments, and we have to say hats off to the state government, that the state government has actually made it mandatory for minimum wages in healthcare, starting off with the nursing profession. And now the wages for nurses in Kerala would probably on par with the best in India. So a lot of Keralite nurses are coming back to Kerala. So that is one aspect. But I was giving a macro example that it's not enough. We need to have more nursing colleges, and so that we will have more output of manpower on the supply side.
Regarding this manpower part, see, we should not have that misconcept that many of the Kerala nurses have gone abroad because there are no jobs here. It's not really because of job, it's because of the salaries, it's because of the wages in Kerala, because nursing wages in Kerala, as you know, before just 1 year was extremely low, because there were nurses employed for 3,000 rupees just 1 year before. And that is the reason why they seek job outside, like Delhi, Bombay, or where in Delhi and Bombay we were giving around 15,000, 20,000 for nurses, and abroad it goes much, much higher. That is the reason, not because there is not job availability here. Now the wages have come up and the nurses are coming down here. Now whenever talking about healthcare and affordability, we have 2 aspects of healthcare. One is healthcare, which is a need for the patients, which is need for the population. What are we doing for the population? Another is, on the other side, healthcare as an entrepreneur. These two are to be taken totally different. If you are looking at healthcare with a very high quality, where we look at 1,000 things to avoid one mistake, healthcare becomes very expensive. Because if you are looking at what we are looking in US and other places, where we may do 1,000 restrictions and 1,000 things just to avoid one mistake, that is where the healthcare becomes extremely expensive, and it will not be affordable for the common population, and it has to be charged much higher as far as an entrepreneur is concerned. Now, for the general population, we need to help our population. That is why most of like our hospitals, we do around 100 surgeries every month free of cost. That is what we give to the population. That is what we give back to the population, what we get from. So healthcare should be in something like a Robin Hood kind of concept, where we should have very good affordable healthcare. Of course, it will be costly, and we should have very good quality healthcare, which is expensive, but it will be of fantastic quality. The affordable healthcare has to be for the population, but at the same time, unless we charge for good quality, we will not be able to give the poor patients affordable healthcare.
I just want to make a point about affordability and quality. The reason that we have to pay a lot for quality is that people believe that knowledge comes from outside of themselves. Ayurveda really emphasizes that if you know how to take care of yourself, then you don't have to go outside. And much of the reason why true Ayurveda is not making a lot of money right now is that we emphasize, like the ginger. Once you take that ginger and you don't take Zantac or you don't take omeprazole, that knowledge is inside of you. If we can increase the amount of education that people have to take care of themselves, how to grow plants at home, how to take care of their own bodies, they're not going to need to go to the healthcare outside their homes as much. There was a study in Bangalore where they got school children to grow 20 medicinal plants, and if they could successfully grow them for a few months, they went to the homes and showed the family how to use those medicinal plants at home for common conditions. And they found that 2 years later, that those families had a decrease in 80% of their healthcare costs because they knew. Thank you.
Yeah, just one more comment here. When we look at the cost of healthcare to this gentleman, we are looking at the cost at the point of tertiary healthcare delivery, surgical and that emergency type of management. But I think there's an opportunity for secondary prevention and tertiary prevention, which is essentially to prevent a condition from developing and becoming that acute and emergency care, which is really where the tremendous opportunity lies in every society. I think we had the data on non-communicable diseases really taking the brunt of, causing daily disability-adjusted life years. So the opportunity to get into secondary prevention really is a huge opportunity, which will also bring down costs effectively, because the people who need that emergency care come down. Yeah, this gentleman here, please.
I thought the panel was excellent. Speaking as a physician as well, and someone who's come back from the US and having very difficult time trying to get things happening here, or the support of the government. My key question to all of you is this: where is the paradigm shift that we're going to have towards garbage management and the waste in Kerala? You have a high-flung medical tourist flying into Kerala, getting dengue penny and going back. I mean, the situation of the garbage and the waste and the mosquitoes and the flies and the rats and the lack of attention being given to this is of a humongous nature. At the same time, it's a great business opportunity. And I don't think you'll get leadership unless we have a Kejriwal or a Kerala Wala coming and doing it in Kerala. We are not going to have it from the current political leadership, 100%. Yeah. But my question is this: can we expect from Dr. Rahman and from Dr. Pillai and you're not specifically in it, but Dr. How do we get public health consciousness, sanitation, hygiene, waste management as a priority? I'm telling you, Kerala, we are living on hype because the situation has declined. You cannot have a shower, not a shower. You cannot take a dip in the Vembanad Kyle. You cannot take a dip in any of the rivers. We'll get psoriasis and whatever else. So this has to be addressed as an emergency. And this, what would you suggest?
So, my theme, of course, in this talk is education. If you take children and you start teaching them about being clean and teach them about their clean projects that were tried in the 1970s in the US, kids take the environment and they make it happen, and they influence their teachers, they influence their parents, they influence everyone around them. So that's one place where you could create a lot of projects, and some of them would be pure education projects or public health projects, but you could even turn it into an entrepreneurial scheme. The other is to ask people who run hospitals what they actually do for waste management.
We are yeah.
Is that there is a great lesson to be learned from the medical practitioners of Kerala. I think Kerala is rather unique in the pan-India concept that the IMA of Kerala is running IMAGE, which has really effectively solved the medical waste management issue of all hospitals in Kerala. So I keep wondering that if the medical community of Kerala can get together and solve this problem, it should be more easier the rest of the issues. So some of these ideas, I think we'll all have to collaborate together.
Can you put a little bit of land and facility in your place for waste management?
I can't answer that question straight away because we are a private entity. But on a PPP model, we can look at that, yes.
I think we have frightfully run out of time. One question, I think this gentleman here, and then we'll conclude.
My name is George. I'm pretty impressed on the healthcare infrastructure that we have and that's going to come, and we have leading doctors here, and quality care is coming in. But what do you think about patient engagement? See, the patient engagement is something that we don't have in India, and
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Like doctor said that there's a patient education where the patient would know what to do for the preventive care, and again from the hospital perspective, how do the post care support that the hospital gives, like whether the patient have taken their pills or whether they are ready for the next sessions with the doctor. Like everybody have got their smartphones and tablets, and the technology is there.
We have heard your question. Thank you.
See, going back to my colleague, Dr. Bhattacharya, what she was talking about, it's all to do with education. Now, I look at my own family, and I try so hard to tell my boys that you should not be drinking so much of Coke or Pepsis. But what do you do when we are in this consumerist age where everything is instant? You won't have instant coffee, you won't have instant gratification. So I guess all of us in our own families, we have to start with the youngsters. I totally agree that prevention is better. Always stay away from doctors and hospitals. That's something which we need to really practice ourselves to look after our own families and our own health. Simple measures, 30 minutes of a walk, your proper breakfast, proper lunch, proper dinner. Those things will really change the mindset. So patient engagement actually starts more from a preventive and an educational mode so that they have something sustainable throughout their lifespan. Try not to ever fall sick and have a healthy life.
I think on that note, we are compelled to draw this session to a close. However, those of you who'd like to come and interact with individual speakers should certainly do that after we complete this thing. I would like to thank my co-panelists for doing a brilliant job of representing their respective sectors. Very impassionate, and in fact, right from Mr. Kumarvel, the passion with which he talked about setting up what is the number? The magic number, 2670, is it? Something like that, right? 70, yeah, exactly. So I wish you well in that particular vision. Similarly to each one of you is building a world-class organization, and wishing you too, yeah. And I would also like to thank Dr. Rajit, Rajit Nair, for bringing this program together, and also Jose Dominic, my colleague on TIE, who was instrumental in helping us to put this panel together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Before we wind up, I would request Mr. Jose Dominic, Charter Member of TIE Kerala and MD of CGH Earth Group of Hotels, to present mementos to our speakers. First, to the chairman of the session, Mr. Rajiv Vasudevan. To Mr. C.K. Kumarvel. To Dr. Hafiz Rahman. Memento to Dr. Harish Pillai. And finally to Dr. Baswati Bhattacharya. And a big round of applause to Dr. Baswati. Thank you very much, sirs. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's technical session. Thank you very much for your presence. Let me inform you that award ceremony is taking place right now at the Oman Hall, which will be followed by cultural programs and dinner at Space Frame. Have a wonderful time ahead. Thank you.